You've already seen my Mimic origin video, but if you haven't, go check that out first. This video picks apart the Next Age, the Mimic and the Storyteller. This is the timeline of Edwin Murray, his life, his tragedy, and how his own creation spiraled into the chaos we see today. Let's start with Edwin's age. In the Mimic, we're told, for nearly all of Edwin's 24 years of life, he'd loved building things. That places Edwin at 24 years old during the main events of the Mimic. Let's go back a few years. Edwin got his first patent in college for a robotic vacuum cleaner. It made him enough money to start his business right after graduating. The book states, he got his first patent on a robotic vacuum cleaner when he was still a college student. That places Edwin's graduation and company funding around 1973. That same year, he married Fiona and purchased both the Queen Anne house and old brick factory. Then, tragedy struck. Fiona died, giving birth to David, just before dawn on a stormy fall morning. The story tells us that 3 springs have already passed since David and Edwin started living at the factory. Quote, Edwin was already concerned that David was going to catch a bad cold as he'd had the past 2 springs. That puts their move into the factory around 1975, a year after Fiona's death. Fast forward to 1978. At this point, David and Edwin had grown up in the factory, and Edwin had been working for Fazbear Entertainment. He had worked putting endoskeletons into the scent mascot suits from Fazbear Entertainment. We see Edwin's work continue throughout the story Nexie, and we also know that he's created 18 animatronics for them so far. This is furthered with this quote. Edwin set the metal chick head on the table in front of him. This was the 18th animatronic character he'd been asked to create. He'd spent the last year and a half abandoning his own work to bow to another company's agenda. Continuing to further him working on Chica, we have this quote. Edwin returned to his work table and frowned at the yellow chick head laying near one of the table's legs. So these are quotes from the beginning of the book, when he's interrupted by his son David. But then we also have quotes like this that further throughout the story. Quote, later that day when Edwin was finishing up the programming on a pirate fox character, so right there, that is Foxy the Pirate. And then we also have this quote. Edwin picked up a pair of needle nose pliers. He looked at a tangle of wires and then gazed at the endoskeleton he was supposed to be merging with Fazbear Entertainment's latest costume, a blue bunny. So right there we have reference to Edwin working on Chica, Foxy, and Bonnie. I didn't see any indication on Freddy, however there is at the end of the book, during the team's investigation, there is this quote. Behind the table, a metal garment rack held a bunch of Fazbear character costumes. Dominic's flashlight glow picked out a brown Freddy Fazbear costume, a yellow Chica costume, a Foxy costume, a Bonnie costume, and a couple bright pink and yellow-green court gesture costumes. So again, right there, we have direct connection that in the factory, in Edwin Murray's factory, we have Freddy, Foxy, Chica, and Bonnie. David is 4 years old and Edwin is 24. It was early March. Spring rain seeped through the cracks in the factory, as we are told in the beginning of Nexie the Mimic. This is where Edwin's great invention to aid in taking care of his son turns into something horrible, as one could assume. He begins building the Mimic, a robot that would act as a babysitter or a friend to David. Mimic will be built, well, to mimic David's behavior. Edwin loses 3 weeks to making the Mimic. Time passed as his son and the robot grew. Mimic learns more and more. However, clearly not learning that a child playing outside by themselves near a busy street isn't a good idea. Since, while the Mimic remains in the factory, David, well, he's playing ball outside and, oh, would you look at that? He loses his ball. And where's that ball going? Straight towards a traffic-busy street. And what does David do? Tries to retrieve his ball. David tragically dies. We aren't told exactly when, but It's noted in the book that the morning of it was a warm day and the sun was shining. The loss of a son sends Edwin spiraling. 2 weeks passed in fog. Edwin could hardly function. And then, in comes the mimicking robot, asking for ice cream, holding his son's Tiger Rock plush. That's it. He'd snapped. Edwin violently beats the mimic and disappears soon after. A few months later, we jump to December 1978. The team is sent into the factory. A man named Terrence and an unknown partner were sent there a week before Christmas. Quote, "I can't believe they sent us here a week before Christmas," the man said. End quote. These two men figure they're there to finish projects left behind by Murray since the instructions given to them were vague. The unknown man records their findings. That is how the second team is aware of them. I'll get to the second team in a minute. But with that, we can assume we are still in 1978, December 18th. Team A goes to give legs to a different-looking endo that is found when exploring. This different endo being the Mimic. Mimic then booted up, murders the team of 2. After another few months, a second team is sent. Edwin left that place in quite a state when he disappeared a few months ago. Team B listens to the tapes from Team A, and history repeats itself. They too are killed by the Mimic. Okay, so now 2 teams are dead. Timeline-wise, it's looking as this particular event happens late in the winter season. Since the first team was there in December 1987, a week before Christmas, we can assume a rush was put on this team's adventure to the factory since the events recently happened and Fazbear Entertainment want their new and improved endo-fitted mascot suits. So I think it's safe to assume the second team is sent there February or March of 1979. Now, while we could say Team C, Secret of the Mimic events, was sent down immediately after and 3 teams were sent in the span of 4 months, I personally like to say that the team, or well, person in Secret of the Mimic, takes place in maybe the late 1979, November or December, giving Fazbear Entertainment time to learn more about their disappearing teams and exactly what the Mimic is, since, as we hear in the beginning of the trailer, is telling us to obtain the Mimic and explains what it does.
So let me explain the situation. One of our contractors, Edwin Murray, has gone missing, leaving our property abandoned in his warehouse. Your job is simple. Enter the warehouse and retrieve the technology that he was developing for us. It's a kind of prototype endoskeleton that can adapt to any costume and become any character. We suspect it may be malfunctioning, so just be aware of the slim but non-zero chance that you could sustain significant injuries while attempting to retrieve it, including but not limited to death or dismemberment. We fully expect the retrieval process to go smoothly and without incident, but just in case, we suggest you get your affairs in order before arriving.
So at this point, information has been gathered on it. So with all that information given, we can conclude that Edwin Murray was 24 in 1978, the beginning of the novel. He opened his company in 1973. 1 year after that, Fiona dies to childbirth to David in 1974 in the fall. The story begins early spring, and David is 4. This brings us to 1978 in early spring. Then there is time that passes where the Mimic is made, and him and David learn together, etc. David dies early summer. I say summer just because of the quote that is given saying it was a warm morning. Weeks go by. Mimic is beat senselessly by Edwin. We aren't told when Edwin leaves or where he goes, but by the time of December 1978, he's gone. Alright, so with the most confusing bit of figuring out when the Mimic and the Storyteller takes place, and well, Edwin's Age, figuring out Storyteller from here is fairly easy. Now, let's fast forward. In the Storyteller, we're told 2 quotes that more or less sum it up. And since we have the ages and the dates more or less figured out, it's easy math. Quote 1. The Fazbear Entertainment Board was made up of 5 men and 4 women. Edwin, at 64 years old, was the oldest person in the room. Now, if you need another quote to further, Edwin had spent the better part of 3 decades trying to forget. He'd run as far as he could, all the way around the world, until one day he'd run out of money. Then he'd be forced to come back and demand that Fazbear Enterprises honor the buyout agreement. If anyone had told Edwin 40 years before that this was where he'd end up, he'd laugh himself silly. Edwin Murray in a place like this? No way. Edwin Murray was a brilliant engineer, a creative genius. He was designed for great things. 40 years after 1978 brings us to 2018. That's where Edwin resurfaces. While I did just mention that the Storyteller takes place in 2018, I want to pull back on that because, honestly, the date doesn't line up with what my timeline suggests. See, in my current theory, the security breach takes place in March 2018. And if that's true, then Storyteller happening in the same year would just be too close. There's still too much ground to cover. Now, you might be thinking, wait, wasn't Storyteller supposed to take place 40 years after something? You're not wrong, the novel hints at this, but here's what I think. Everything started falling apart in 1974, early 1975, when Edwin's wife died during childbirth. That trauma is the root of it all. So what's 40 years after 1974 or 75? That would be 2014, 2015. That gives us a new anchor for the Storyteller's timeline. Now I can hear some of you saying, but wait, the Pizza Simulator happens in 2023. Doesn't that break everything? Alright, let's talk about that. The HRY 223 code in Pizza Sim is often cited as proof it takes place in 2023. But here's the thing, 223 could mean a lot of things. It could be an employee code, a room ID, even a cipher. If it was meant to clearly say 2023, why not just write 2023? Theorist Gibby's Horror Homestead breaks this down brilliantly, so go check out their take if you want a deeper dive, but for now, I'm tossing out 2023. And now, take a look at the posters like the Fred Masquerade. If you interpret that in the context of 2015 instead of 2025, everything fits so well. Plus, we already know from GGY and other tales from the Pizzaplex stories that the Pizzaplex has been around for a few years before Security Breach, at least 3. That would mean that it was being built or already open by 2015. Here's how it all stacks. Storyteller fits better in early 2017. Edwin's already been back a while. It's not a sudden return. It's a slow reintegration and manipulation. What about FNAF 3? That still works in 2015. The Pizzaplex would have just been starting construction or still just a concept. Pizza Simulator can follow closely behind, maybe late 2015 or 2016. Ultimate Custom Night, well, that's just a digital afterburn, the end of William. FNAF World, symbolic or not, it fits as a transition phase, a break between the old era and the new. So, by 2018, FNAF 6 has already happened. Pizza Simulator ends with Afton's final burning, or so we thought. But this isn't about William anymore. No. Now we face what came before him, the Mimic. This is the new evil, rooted in Edwin's grief, David's screams, and a robot built to learn. With the Mimic at the core of everything now, Edwin's legacy becomes the burning heart of the entire Pizzaplex era. That more or less sums it all up. I hope that I was able to clarify how I think Edwin and Mimic fits into our current timeline and how it works exactly with the stories, since I do know that Edwin's age is widely questioned. I think this explains it all very well. And the only thing that was the biggest issue in the beginning was when the Mega Pizzaplex was built and blah blah blah. Oh, and FNAF 6 taking place in 2023. Either way, I digress. I hope you guys enjoyed this theory. If you did, please give me a like, maybe subscribe, and please let me know what you guys thought of my little timeline. And until next time.